Hello and welcome to Nap to History, a quiet space where we slow down and let the past unfold one soft story at a time. Tonight we'll gently step into the sandals of those who lived and fought in the great arenas of ancient Rome, not to glorify violence or memorize dates, but to feel the weight of lives once lived in the shadow of the amphitheater. Whether you're lying down for the night or just taking a moment to breathe, I'm really glad you're here. If you find comfort in calm, thoughtful history, feel free to subscribe. There's always another peaceful chapter waiting. Before we begin this journey back in time, I'd love to know where in the world you're listening from and what time of day it is for you. Feel free to leave a comment and share if you enjoy calm historical storytelling like this. Let's take a moment to set the stage. The Roman Empire, at its height, stretched from the windswept hills of Britain to the sun-baked sands of Egypt, from the Rhine's cold waters to the Euphrates' distant banks. It was a world of remarkable contrasts, where marble columns reached toward the heavens, while beneath the streets, slaves toiled in darkness. In this vast empire, few institutions captured the Roman imagination quite like the gladiatorial games. For over 6 centuries, from roughly the 3rd century BC to the 6th century AD, these spectacles drew millions of spectators to amphitheaters across the Roman world, from the mighty Colosseum in Rome to smaller arenas in provincial towns. But what was it truly like to be a gladiator? To wake each morning knowing that your life hung in the balance of crowd approval and imperial whim? To train your body into a weapon while your soul yearned for freedom? Tonight we'll walk in the footsteps of these men and women, understanding their world not through the lens of Hollywood spectacle, but through the quiet dignity of human lives lived under extraordinary circumstances. Imagine, if you will, awakening not in your comfortable bed, but on a simple straw mattress in a small stone cell. The air is thick with the scent of oil and sweat, leather and metal. Through the barred window, you can hear the distant sounds of Rome awakening. Merchants calling their wares, cartwheels on cobblestone, the eternal murmur of the world's greatest city beginning another day. But you are not part of that free world. You are a gladiator, and this is your ludus, your training school, both your home and your prison. The gladiatorial schools of Rome were fascinating institutions, part military barracks, part prison, part athletic academy. The largest and most famous was the Ludus Magnus, connected to the Colosseum by an underground tunnel, but there were others, the Ludus Dacicus, the Ludus Gallicus, each specializing in different fighting styles from across the empire. These schools were owned by private citizens called lanistae, who purchased slaves, prisoners of war, and condemned criminals to train as fighters. Some free men, called autritari, even volunteered for gladiatorial service, trading their freedom for the chance at glory and prize money, though they represented only a small fraction of all gladiators. Your day would begin before dawn, with the sharp blast of a horn echoing through the stone corridors. Rising from your simple bed, you would join dozens of other gladiators in the central. After the morning meal came the most important part of your day, training. The courtyard would fill with the sounds of wooden swords striking shields, the grunts of exertion, and the sharp commands of the instructors called doctores. These were former gladiators who had survived long enough to earn their freedom and now passed on their knowledge to the next generation. Each had mastered a particular fighting style, and each would train only those gladiators who fought in that tradition. Perhaps you were a murmillo, a heavily armored fighter who carried a large rectangular shield and a gladius, the short Roman sword. Your helmet would be decorated with a fish motif, and you would typically face retiari, the net fighters, in carefully choreographed battles that played out the eternal struggle between the fisherman and the fish. Or maybe you were a Thracian, lighter and more agile, with a small round shield and a curved psyche sword, your movements quick and precise like a deadly dance. The retiari held a special place in the gladiatorial hierarchy, fighting with only a net, a trident, and a dagger, relying on speed and skill rather than armor for protection. They wore only a simple tunic and arm guard, their faces exposed to the crowd, making them both more vulnerable and more human to the spectators. Some scholars believe that retiari were considered less honorable because they fought without the traditional armor and weapons of a warrior, but their fights were no less deadly for their seeming simplicity. Training would consume your morning and much of your afternoon. You would practice on wooden poles called pallus, developing the muscle memory that might save your life in the arena. You would learn to fight not just with weapons, but with your mind, reading your opponent's movements, understanding the rhythm of combat, knowing when to attack and when to defend. The training was brutal and unforgiving, but it was also your greatest hope for survival. A well-trained gladiator might live for years, accumulating victories and prize money, perhaps even earning enough to purchase his freedom. But training was only part of your education as a gladiator. You would also learn the subtle art of performance, for the games were as much theatre as they were combat. The crowd demanded not just violence, but spectacle, dramatic gestures, displays of courage, moments of mercy or defiance that would linger in their memories long after the sand had been raked clean. A gladiator, who understood how to work the crowd, how to earn their favour and sympathy, might find that crucial moment when defeat seemed certain, transformed into victory by the roar of approval from the stands. The social dynamics within the ludus were complex and nuanced. Despite being slaves and prisoners, gladiators developed a fierce brotherhood, understanding that they shared a fate unlike any other in Roman society. They formed clubs called collegia, with their own internal hierarchies and traditions. Veteran gladiators, those who had survived many fights, commanded enormous respect and often served as mentors to newer fighters. These relationships could mean the difference between life and death in the arena, as an experienced gladiator might share crucial knowledge about a particular opponent or fighting style. Some gladiators even formed romantic relationships within the schools, though these were officially discouraged. There were gladiatresses, female gladiators, though they were far less common and often fought as novelty acts, rather than in the main events. Archaeological evidence from Pompeii and other sites suggests that gladiators, despite their low social status, were often sex symbols in Roman society. Their physical prowess and dangerous lifestyle, making them objects of fascination for both men and women of higher social classes. The medical care available to gladiators was surprisingly sophisticated, reflecting their value as investments. Each ludus employed medici, doctors who specialized in treating the injuries common to arena combat. These physicians developed advanced techniques for treating cuts, broken bones, and internal injuries. They understood the importance of proper nutrition and physical conditioning, and they worked closely with the trainers to ensure that gladiators remained in peak physical condition. Some gladiators even received better medical care than many free Romans, as their earning potential made them valuable property. Between training sessions, you might have brief moments of quiet contemplation in your cell. The walls would be bare stone, perhaps decorated with a simple shrine to your patron god, Mars for courage in battle, Fortuna for luck, or Nemesis for the divine justice that might protect you in the arena. Many gladiators were deeply religious, finding in their faith the strength to face the constant possibility of death. Some converted to Christianity in the later empire, finding in the promise of eternal life a hope that transcended their earthly circumstances. As the weeks and months passed, you would begin to understand the rhythm of the gladiatorial calendar. The games were tied to religious festivals, imperial celebrations, and the political ambitions of wealthy sponsors. The most prestigious events occurred in Rome itself, in the great Colosseum that could hold 50,000 spectators, but smaller games took place throughout the empire in amphitheatres that dotted the landscape from Spain to Syria. The night before a fight, sleep would come hard if at all. You would lie on your simple bed, listening to the sounds of the city beyond the walls, perhaps thinking of home if you remembered it, or of the life you might build if you could somehow earn your freedom. Some gladiators wrote letters to loved ones, though literacy was not common among slaves. Others made offerings to their gods or shared quiet conversations with their cellmates about tactics, fears, and hopes. The morning of the games would bring a mixture of anticipation and dread. You would rise early for a final training session, loosening your muscles and practicing your techniques one last time. The morning meal would be more elaborate than usual, a final feast for those who might not see another sunset. Some gladiators ate heartily, believing that strength came from food. Others could barely manage a few bites, their stomachs churning with nervous energy. The preparation for combat was a ritual in itself. You would be helped into your armor by attendants, each piece carefully checked and secured. The weight of your equipment would settle onto your shoulders like a familiar burden, the helmet that limited your vision but protected your skull, the shield that could mean the difference between life and death, the weapons that had become extensions of your own body through countless hours of practice. As you waited in the underground chambers beneath the arena, you could hear the crowd gathering above, a low rumble that would gradually build to a thunderous roar as the amphitheater filled. The sound would seep through the stone and into your bones, a constant reminder of the thousands of eyes that would soon be watching your every move, judging your performance, cheering for your victory or your death with equal enthusiasm. The games would begin with elaborate processions and ceremonies. Musicians would play, dancers would perform, and exotic animals might be displayed or hunted in mock battles called venations. But you would remain below, waiting for your moment, feeling the weight of anticipation building like pressure in your chest. Some gladiators used this time for final prayers or meditation. Others engaged in nervous banter with their companions, making jokes to lighten the mood or sharing memories of past victories. When your turn finally came, you would climb the narrow stairs from the hypodium, the underground area, into the blazing light of the arena. The transformation was always shocking, from the dim, cool chambers below to the bright open space of the amphitheater floor, with its carefully raked sand designed to absorb blood and provide secure footing. The noise of the crowd would wash over you like a physical force, 50,000 voices united in anticipation of spectacle. The arena floor itself was a marvel of engineering, though you might not have had time to appreciate its sophistication. Beneath the sand lay a complex system of tunnels, chambers, and mechanical devices that could raise scenery, animals, or even gladiators through trapdoors in the floor. Water could be channeled in to flood the arena for naval battles called naumachia, or elaborate sets could be constructed to represent forests, buildings, or mythological landscapes. Your opponent would enter from the opposite side of the arena, and you would meet in the center for the traditional salute to the sponsor of the games. Ave Caesar, morituri te salutamus. Hail Caesar, those who are about to die salute you. Though this famous phrase appears in only one historical source, and may not have been a regular part of gladiatorial ritual, it captures the gravity of the moment when two trained fighters faced each other, knowing that only one might leave alive. The fight itself would begin with a blast of trumpets, and suddenly all the months of training would crystallize into moments of pure intensity. Every movement would be deliberate, the result of countless hours of practice. You would circle your opponent, looking for weaknesses, testing his defenses, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. The crowd would react to every exchange, gasping at near misses, roaring approval for skillful attacks, falling into tense silence during moments of careful maneuvering. Combat between skilled gladiators was not the crude hack and slash depicted in popular culture. It was a sophisticated dance of advance and retreat, attack and defense, each fighter using his particular strengths to exploit his opponent's weaknesses. A Murmillo might try to use his superior armor and large shield to wear down a more agile Rhetarius, while the net fighter would seek to use his speed and reach advantage to strike decisive blows before his opponent could close the distance. The psychological aspects of gladiatorial combat were as important as the physical. Each fighter had to project confidence and aggression, while remaining calm and analytical. The crowd's reaction could influence the flow of battle, as approval or disapproval might affect a gladiator's morale. Some fighters were natural showmen who could work the audience like seasoned actors, while others focused entirely on the technical aspects of combat, letting their skill speak for itself. Injuries were common and often severe. A gladiator might fight with broken ribs, deep cuts, or strained muscles, relying on adrenaline and training to push through pain that would incapacitate an ordinary person. The sand of the arena would gradually darken with blood and sweat, becoming treacherous footing that could cause a fatal slip at the crucial moment. If you were wounded but not killed, you might signal surrender by raising your finger in the traditional gesture of defeat. The crowd would then play a crucial role in determining your fate, their cheers or jeers influencing the decision of the sponsor or emperor about whether to grant you mercy. The famous thumbs up or thumbs down gesture is largely a modern invention. Ancient sources suggest that a closed fist meant mercy, while an extended thumb indicated death, though the exact gestures remain debated among historians. Victory brought its own complex emotions. The rush of survival would mix with exhaustion, relief, and sometimes regret or grief for a fallen opponent who might have been a friend and training partner. Winners received palm branches and prize money, and successful gladiators could accumulate significant wealth over time. Some became celebrities throughout the empire, their names and images appearing on pottery, mosaics and graffiti found in cities from Britain to Egypt. But victory was always temporary. Even the most successful gladiator knew that each fight might be his last, that a moment's inattention or a stroke of bad luck could end everything. The most successful gladiators were those who could find the balance between aggression and caution, taking calculated risks while never becoming reckless. Some fought for years, accumulating dozens of victories and becoming legends in their own time. The relationship between gladiators and the Roman public was complex and often contradictory. While gladiators were technically slaves and outcasts, successful fighters could achieve a kind of celebrity status that transcended their legal position. Graffiti from Pompeii refers to gladiators as suspirium puellarum, the size of girls, indicating their appeal as romantic figures. Wealthy Romans sometimes paid large sums to spend time with famous gladiators, and some gladiators leveraged their fame into business opportunities or political connections. Yet this celebrity came at a terrible cost. Even the most successful gladiator lived under the constant threat of death, and most fighters died young, either in the arena or from injuries sustained in combat. Archaeological evidence from gladiator cemeteries reveals the brutal toll of the profession: skulls bearing the marks of fatal wounds, bones showing evidence of repeated injuries and crude medical interventions, lives cut short in their prime. The training regimen of gladiators was incredibly demanding, requiring not just physical strength, but mental discipline and tactical intelligence. Different types of gladiators required different skills. The heavily armored secutor needed endurance and strength to fight effectively, while carrying 60 or 70 pounds of equipment, while the lightly armed retiarius needed speed, agility, and precise timing to use his net and trident effectively against more heavily protected opponents. Beyond the basic fighting techniques, gladiators had to master the art of entertaining the crowd. This meant learning to fight with style and flair, creating dramatic moments that would keep the audience engaged. A gladiator who could make the crowd gasp with a spectacular move or display of courage might find himself pardoned even in defeat, while a fighter who appeared cowardly or gave a lackluster performance might be condemned regardless of the technical outcome of the fight. The equipment used by different types of gladiators was carefully designed and maintained. A murmillo's shield, for example, was not just protection, but also a weapon that could be used to bash an opponent or deflect attacks. The curved blade of a Thracian sickle was perfect for hooking around an opponent's shield, while the retiarius's net required special techniques for throwing, retrieving, and fighting when it became entangled with an opponent's weapons. Some gladiators specialized in fighting against wild animals rather than other humans. These bestiarii faced lions, bears, bulls, and exotic creatures from across the empire in spectacles that demonstrated Roman dominance over the natural world. Fighting animals required completely different skills from human combat, understanding animal behavior, using the environment of the arena to advantage, and developing techniques for dealing with opponents who fought on instinct rather than training. The daily routine of a gladiator extended far beyond combat training. Physical conditioning included running, weight training with lead weights, and swimming when possible. Gladiators also studied their potential opponents, learning their fighting styles, favorite techniques, and weaknesses. This intelligence gathering could be the difference between life and death in the arena, as knowing that an opponent favored a particular attack or had a weak left shoulder could provide a crucial advantage. Medical knowledge was essential for survival. Gladiators learned to treat their own minor injuries, to recognize the signs of serious internal damage, and to fight effectively while wounded. They understood the anatomy of combat, which wounds were merely painful and which were potentially fatal, how to strike to disable rather than kill when mercy was called for, and how to make even minor injuries appear more dramatic for the crowd's benefit. The psychological pressures of gladiatorial life were immense. Living constantly with the threat of death required mental techniques for managing fear and anxiety. Some gladiators found solace in philosophy. Stoicism was particularly popular, with its emphasis on accepting fate and finding meaning in duty. Others turned to religion, whether traditional Roman gods, mystery cults like Mithraism, or in later periods Christianity. The bonds between gladiators were often stronger than those found in the outside world. Men who trained together, fought together, and faced death together developed relationships of extraordinary depth and loyalty. When one gladiator died, his comrades would often hold elaborate funeral ceremonies, pooling their limited resources to ensure their friend received proper burial rites. These ceremonies were not just expressions of grief, but also affirmations of their shared humanity in a world that often treated them as mere entertainment. Some gladiators formed romantic relationships with free women, despite the legal and social barriers that made such relationships difficult. Archaeological evidence suggests that some gladiator wives were buried with their husbands, and legal documents record instances of free women marrying gladiators who had earned their freedom. These relationships required great courage from both parties, as they faced social ostracism and legal complications. The path to freedom for a gladiator was narrow but not impossible. The most common route was through the rudis, a wooden sword given to gladiators who had earned their release through exceptional service. This might come after a certain number of victories, as a reward for particularly courageous behavior, or as a gift from a grateful sponsor. Some gladiators purchased their freedom with prize money they had accumulated over years of fighting. But freedom came with its own challenges. Ex-gladiators found it difficult to integrate into normal Roman society, as their past marked them as different and dangerous. Many became trainers in gladiatorial schools, passing on their skills to the next generation. Others started businesses, often related to their fighting experience, running taverns, working as bodyguards, or training private security forces. Some even returned to the arena as free men, fighting for higher stakes and greater glory. The gladiatorial games served multiple functions in Roman society, beyond mere entertainment. They were a form of social control, channeling the violent impulses of the population into organized spectacle. They reinforced social hierarchies by demonstrating the power of those who could command life and death. They provided a venue for political display, as sponsors used lavish games to curry favor with the public and advance their careers. But the games also revealed contradictions in Roman values. While Romans prized courage, honor, and martial virtue, they found their greatest expression of these ideals in the performance of slaves and outcasts. The best gladiators embodied the very qualities that Romans claimed to admire most: bravery in the face of death, skill in combat, and grace under pressure, yet they remained at the bottom of the social hierarchy. As the Roman Empire evolved, so did the gladiatorial games. In the early centuries, fights were relatively simple affairs with basic equipment and straightforward rules. Over time, they became increasingly elaborate spectacles with exotic equipment, complex scenarios, and sophisticated staging. Emperors competed to present the most impressive games, leading to ever more extravagant displays that could bankrupt even wealthy sponsors. The rise of Christianity within the empire gradually changed attitudes toward the games. Christian writers condemned the spectacles as cruel and degrading, arguing that they promoted violence and bloodlust among the population. Some emperors attempted to reform the games, mandating that fights end at first blood rather than death. But these reforms were often ignored or circumvented by creative interpretations of the rules. The economic impact of the gladiatorial games was enormous. The industry supported not just the gladiators themselves, but trainers, equipment manufacturers, arena staff, vendors, and countless other workers. Entire communities grew up around major amphitheaters, creating economic ecosystems that depended on the regular staging of spectacles. The cost of maintaining this infrastructure was substantial, requiring continuous investment from both public and private sources. Archaeological excavations at gladiatorial schools have revealed fascinating details about daily life for these fighters. Sleeping quarters were small, but not uncomfortable, with evidence of personal possessions and decorative items that suggest gladiators were allowed some degree of individual expression. Kitchens were sophisticated operations capable of feeding hundreds of men, with evidence of varied diets that included meat, fish, and vegetables in addition to the basic grains that formed the foundation of gladiatorial nutrition. The training equipment found at these sites reveals the sophistication of gladiatorial education. Wooden swords and shields of various weights allowed fighters to build strength progressively. Specialized training devices helped develop specific skills, rotating posts for practicing attacks from multiple angles, spring-loaded mechanisms for improving reaction time, and weighted gear for building endurance. Medical facilities at gladiatorial schools were among the most advanced in the ancient world. Operating theaters, pharmaceutical preparation areas, and recovery rooms show that significant resources were devoted to keeping gladiators healthy and treating their injuries. The level of medical care available to gladiators was often superior to that available to free Romans of modest means, reflecting their economic value to their owners. The armor and weapons used by gladiators were works of art, as well as tools of war. Master craftsmen created elaborate helmets decorated with mythological scenes, shields bearing intricate designs, and swords with perfect balance and razor-sharp edges. The quality of a gladiator's equipment often reflected his status and success. Veteran fighters earned the right to wear more elaborate and effective gear, while newcomers made do with simpler, more basic equipment. Different regions of the empire developed their own variations on gladiatorial traditions. Gallic gladiators fought with long swords and large shields, reflecting the martial traditions of their homeland. Germanic fighters used battle axes and small round shields. These regional variations added variety to the games and allowed Romans to witness fighting styles from across their vast empire without leaving the amphitheater. The women who participated in gladiatorial games, though fewer in number, faced unique challenges and opportunities. Female gladiators, or gladiatrices, often fought against other women, or sometimes against dwarves or exotic animals in novelty matches. Some evidence suggests that noble women occasionally participated in the games as amateurs, though this practice was generally condemned by conservative Romans as a degradation of traditional feminine virtues. The betting that surrounded gladiatorial games was extensive and sophisticated. Professional gamblers studied gladiators' records, fighting styles, and physical condition to make informed wagers. These betting networks created additional economic incentives for match fixing and corruption, though the penalties for such activities were severe. Some gladiators were suspected of throwing fights to create favorable odds for subsequent matches. The political dimensions of the games were complex and ever-present. Emperors used gladiatorial spectacles to demonstrate their power and generosity to the people of Rome. Provincial governors staged games to curry favor with local populations and advance their political careers. Even private citizens could gain significant political influence by sponsoring particularly memorable spectacles, though the costs involved limited this practice to the very wealthy. As Christianity gained influence in the empire, the theological objections to the games became more prominent and politically powerful. Christian writers argued that watching gladiatorial combat brutalized spectators and encouraged a culture of violence that was incompatible with Christian values of mercy and forgiveness. They also pointed out that forcing men to fight to the death for entertainment violated basic principles of human dignity and divine justice. The economics of gladiatorial schools were complex business operations. Successful lannistae needed to balance the costs of training, feeding, housing, and equipping gladiators against the income from renting them out for games. They had to maintain relationships with sponsors, manage the careers of their fighters, and constantly recruit new talent to replace gladiators who died, earned freedom, or became too injured to fight effectively. The final centuries of the gladiatorial games saw gradual decline rather than sudden abolition. Economic pressures made the elaborate spectacles increasingly difficult to afford. Political changes reduced the importance of public entertainment as a tool of governance. Religious opposition created moral pressure against the games. Most importantly, the military and social conditions that had created a steady supply of prisoners and slaves for the arena began to change as the empire itself evolved. The last recorded gladiatorial games in Rome took place in the early 5th century AD, marking the end of a tradition that had lasted for over 600 years. By this time, the games had already been banned in the Eastern Empire, and even in the West, They had become increasingly rare and less elaborate. The great amphitheatres that had once echoed with the clash of weapons and the roar of crowds gradually fell into disuse, their stones carried away for other construction projects or their interiors converted to other purposes. Yet the legacy of the gladiators lived on in the imagination of subsequent generations. Medieval chroniclers wrote about them with a mixture of fascination and horror. Renaissance artists depicted them in paintings and sculptures. Modern writers, filmmakers, and historians continue to find in their stories powerful themes of courage, survival, and the human spirit under extreme pressure. Archaeological discoveries continue to reveal new aspects of gladiatorial life. Recent excavations have uncovered evidence of gladiator diets, training methods, medical practices, and social relationships that challenge many assumptions about these ancient fighters. Scientific analysis of skeletal remains has provided insights into their physical condition, the injuries they sustained, and the effectiveness of ancient medical treatments. The gladiatorial games represented one of the most complex and contradictory aspects of Roman civilization. They revealed both the cruelty and the sophistication of Roman society, its appreciation for skill and courage, alongside its acceptance of extreme social inequality. They demonstrated the power of spectacle to unite and control populations, while also showing how entertainment could become an end in itself, consuming enormous resources that might have been used for other purposes. For the individual gladiator, life was a constant balance between hope and despair, skill and luck, fame and degradation. Each fight was both an opportunity for glory and a brush with death. Each victory brought pride and prize money, but also the certainty that another fight would follow. Each defeat that was survived was a reprieve that might not be repeated. The bonds of brotherhood among gladiators were forged in circumstances unlike any other in the ancient world. Men who might have been enemies on the battlefield of their homelands became brothers in the arena, united by their shared fate and mutual dependence. They developed their own codes of honor, their own traditions and rituals, their own ways of finding meaning and dignity in circumstances designed to strip them of both. As we near the end of our journey into the world of the Roman gladiator, we might reflect on what these ancient fighters can teach us about resilience, courage, and the human capacity to find meaning in even the most difficult circumstances. They faced each day knowing it might be their last, yet they continued to train, to fight, to hope, and to build relationships with their fellow gladiators that transcended the brutal realities of their situation. Their stories remind us that even in the darkest circumstances, human beings can find ways to maintain their dignity and their humanity. The gladiators who walked into the arena with their heads held high, who fought with skill and courage, who showed mercy to defeated opponents and loyalty to their brothers, demonstrated that no external circumstances can completely destroy the human spirit. The gladiatorial games ended over 1500 years ago, but the questions they raise about entertainment, violence, social justice, and human dignity remain relevant today. In our own time, we grapple with similar issues about the role of violent entertainment in society, the treatment of marginalized populations, and the ways in which spectacular displays can both unite and divide communities. Perhaps most importantly, the gladiators remind us of the power of individual choice within constrained circumstances. Even as slaves and prisoners, they could choose how to face their fate, with courage or cowardice, with honor or dishonor, with compassion or cruelty toward their fellow fighters. These choices, made in the most extreme circumstances imaginable, reveal something fundamental about human nature and the possibilities for moral action, even in morally compromised situations. As the Roman Empire itself passed into history, the amphitheatres fell silent, their sands no longer darkened with blood, their tunnels no longer echoing with the footsteps of nervous fighters preparing for battle. Nature began to reclaim these monuments to human spectacle, with grass growing through the seats where crowds once cheered, and trees taking root in the chambers where gladiators once trained. But in that silence, perhaps we can hear something else, the whispered stories of countless men and women who faced impossible odds with whatever courage they could muster, who found friendship and meaning in the most unlikely places, who lived and died largely forgotten by history, but whose struggles and triumphs speak to something eternal in the human experience. The Roman gladiator, stepping into the arena for what might be the last time, reminds us that every day we too make choices about how to face our challenges, how to treat our fellow human beings, and how to find meaning in circumstances we cannot control. In the end, perhaps that is the most important lesson we can learn from these ancient fighters, not how to fight with sword and shield, but how to live with courage and dignity, regardless of the arena in which we find ourselves. And so as we drift off to sleep tonight, let us carry with us not images of violence and spectacle, but the quieter truths revealed in the lives of those who lived in the shadow of the amphitheater. Let us remember their brotherhood, their courage, their determination to remain human in circumstances designed to dehumanize them. May their stories remind us of our own capacity for resilience and grace, and may we find in their ancient struggles inspiration for facing whatever challenges await us in our own modern arena. Thank you for joining me on this exploration of life as a Roman gladiator. I hope this journey through time has been both informative and peaceful, offering insights into a fascinating chapter of human history. If you enjoyed this gentle exploration of the past, please consider subscribing for more calm historical storytelling. Until next time, may you sleep well, perchance to dream of ancient courage and timeless human dignity. Good night, and sweet dreams of a past that continues to teach us about the enduring strength of the human spirit.